Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 36th episode of the Manor Podcast. I'm your co-host, Roger Bodee, joined as always by my best friend and other co-host, Michael Hamilton. Michael, do you think it's ironic that we're in for a huge snowstorm, but yet the world of Wraith is being affected by global warming at the moment?
I didn't really think about that. We got a bunch of ice bands. Everything's going to heat up a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. It is, I guess, ironic.
Yeah, because we're supposed to get like a foot of snow, and it's supposed to be the worst blizzard in all year and stuff like that here in the Midwest. And but LSS is over there in New Zealand just banning ice.
Yeah.
So
It's summer down there, so
that makes sense. That makes sense. Why we're on opposite ends of the spectrum then. So this is hot off the heels of the new ban and suspended announcement that just came out today. I think it's been out for what, like 2 hours now or something like that. Long enough for go ahead.
Just long enough for me to read it, be like, I want to talk about this. Let's record tonight.
We're gonna wait for whenever they posted it to obviously give our takes on it. And I think it would have been the hardest to record a podcast if they were just like, no changes, and we just would have been like, yeah, everything's fine, whatever. We kind of expected no changes. But boy, were there more than no changes. Do you want to read the list of cards that have now been shaken up in the Classic Constructed format, Michael?
So the following changes to Classic Constructed are effective starting January 30th, 2023. So first, they're not going to hit this last weekend of ProQuest, which is nice. But Belittle is banned. Winter's Wail is banned. Amulet of Ice is suspended until Icelander becomes Living Legend, and Hypothermia is suspended until Icelander becomes Living Legend. That's a lot.
Yeah. Where do you want to start on that list?
So I guess I want to start with what I think they got right, if that's not a weird way to put that. So first, I do really appreciate that they gave us this announcement almost a full week early, since we're trying to get ready for the Indianapolis calling. Getting this drastic of a shakeup like 5 days before our tournament would have been not really enough time to figure out a new deck, because I was going back and forth between the two ice heroes that I think are good, Oldhim and Icelander, and I was pretty sure I was going to play one of them, and I am pretty sure I'm not going to play one of them now, and I have some time to figure out what I'm going to play. So I think the timing of the announcement was good, giving us that extra five extra days, so we have 10 days to figure it out instead of 5. It was great. And then
yeah, look at that. LSS was ahead of schedule for something,
yeah, that's awesome.
So, kudos.
The other thing, I really do like the Hypothermia ban. I think that it does pretty bad things to the game where you can just like get your action point taken away with no really recourse. I think there's not like anything you can do. You're just like, okay, I'm not gonna have an action point anymore. And instant speed Hypothermia, while I don't think the card was like insanely broken, and a lot of the time it wasn't very good to even arsenal it, and it led to some awkward spots. The times that it was a blowout, and even in just specific matchups where it could blow out heroes where they didn't really have any counterplay to an instant speed Hypothermia, was really bad for the game. I feel like Dash is a deck that has a lot of tools to spend her resources well. She can she plays well around like Frostbites and stuff, and it's a deck that should have a good matchup into Icelander. But if you have 3 copies of Hypothermia, that matchup was like at least reasonable for you because of single-handedly Hypothermia being almost always a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 when you cast it.
Yeah, and importantly, if they do even want to try to come in with a second attack after you cast Hypothermia, they have to sacrifice one of their pieces of Arcane Barrier in Achilles Accelerator. That's a hard one to say for some reason. In order to do so. So that's obviously a huge sacrifice in that matchup.
So I personally am a big fan of Hypothermia being banned. It also, a lot of random decks just couldn't beat a Hypothermia also. So I think that Dash is like the one that comes to mind because it's like the most popular in the metagame. And
a good portion of Briar's attacks gained go again as well. And that was already a super favorable matchup for Icelander.
Yeah, Viscerai too. So yeah, I don't know. I'm glad Hypothermia is gone. I think like that is if I had to make the banned and suspended announcement, that would be the card that I would put on this list. The other three, I don't
That's
think
it.
so.
That's it. No.
So what do you think about hypothermia?
I think suspending hypothermia makes sense until Icelander rotates out. It's not really a problem in decks like Oldhim or Icelander because they have to spend basically their whole turn. I guess specifically Oldhim usually has to spend his whole turn setting up that card. And Icelander, it's she's sacrificing some amount of efficiency to end her turn with an action point in order to deploy it. And it's just a lot different of a card when it's face up on the table, and supposed to you're planning your turn around it, and you kind of have to plan every turn around this potential blowout that's like lurking. Like even like a deck like Fi that has just so much natural go again still had to respect the like, hypothermia by like not swinging Searing Ember Blade at the wrong time on combat chains, and basically completely locked out of playing Kodachis in the matchup, because if at any point in time you activated a Kodachi and then a hypothermia happened, that's just, well, you're not swinging that other Kodachi buddy or anything else that turn. So it just was a little too restrictive at instant speed. So you're right, I don't mind it, and once it can no longer just come out of nowhere and pop up, I think it'll be a lot more fair of a card.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what you said, how it was like you had to plan every turn around the potential of hypothermia, I think that was a big part of why it's problematic when the other players play it or the other heroes play it and it's face up. You're like, okay, what is the best I can do with this turn since I can't give my cards go again?
Right. And like there would be lots of times where like if I'm playing an Icelander, I just have to shrug my shoulders and be like, okay, if you got hypothermia, I guess I lose this game. That's just not a very good place to be.
Yeah. And I think the other card that's kind of similar that does a similar thing is Blizzard, but Blizzard has a lot more counterplay, whereas if you're just holding a blue, you can just pay for it. So like there are turns.
Yeah, that or like you can just like put E-Pots in your deck and they go to Blizzard you just sacrifice one of your E-Pots and move on with your life. So
yeah, for sure. So since we're talking about Icelander, let's talk about Amulet of Ice. I think Amulet of Ice was a very powerful card. It both was the card that let Icelander use 4 or 5 card hands and not waste cards, basically. Amulet of Ice into like an attack and to activate Waiting Moon was a pretty clean thing you could do with 4 cards and spend all of them. And it also, the fact that it would eventually trade for a card later in the game was really powerful too. And it did these things, but it didn't come without costs. Being a no block definitely does matter. And Ellis has kind of talked about the risk reward of putting Amulet of Ice into your deck, how like it should be a risk to have a 0 block card in your deck. And they felt like it wasn't because every Icelander deck was playing 3 Amulet of Ice. But I don't know, I guess. I think that once you take Hypothermia away, Icelander does have I think she has some bad matchups now, whereas before she didn't really have bad matchups. I think Dromai was a little bit tough.
And Oldhim, but
And yeah, Oldhim,
hypothermia didn't do anything against Oldhim.
yeah. That's a good point. But yeah, so I don't think Amulet of Ice, it doesn't seem like it was necessary. And it also does hurt Lexi, which is a hero that has continuously been almost there on power level and gotten hit by these bans for Briar, these bans for Icelander, and she's just kind of getting beat up, and she hasn't really done anything to warrant that.
Yeah, and so I think they specifically said that Icelander even plays Amulet of Ice into all these aggressive decks, but wasn't that like a play draw decision where on the draw you would side them out? Like I certainly don't think it was a card like you just like absolutely never cut, right? Like there were still times where it was right to like trim on Amulet of Ices.
Yeah, I think I definitely cut them into Phi on the draw some of the time. I'm not sure if that was correct. It was what I was doing for a while. I'm pretty sure in the finals of nationals I boarded out my Amulet of Ice. Because I was going second. I'm not positive that that's correct, but it definitely like there was a solid consideration for doing it.
Yeah, and the difference between playing an Amulet of Ice, the 0 cost item with Go Again, and setting up an Insidious Chill, especially for a deck like Ice Lexi, is just so monumentally different. Like Icelander can still pretty happily, play some Insidious Chills. It doesn't cost her action points. She gets to play it at instant speed on her opponent's turn. It costs 3, but Icelander's playing a million blues anyways, still to this day. And so she's still going to have ways to strip her opponent's hand, just not as many. Well, I guess in my mind, though, like in a deck like Icelander, you just go, okay, I don't have Amulet of Ice. I just swap in 3 Winter's Bite. And it's not the exact same thing because you can't just like sit on them. But it seems like just like a pretty simple, swap for those 2 cards. And I don't know how meaningful it will be in the long run, especially with Oldhim getting nuked, but we'll get there.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get there. I do think it does reasonably hurt Icelander to not have it, but I don't know. It just feels weird to me when Icelander's been good. You suspend the card that makes some of her matchups good and probably like knocks her down a couple pegs to where she's a hero that has like some pretty bad matchups. I think Dash like no, you don't have if you once you suspend Hypothermia, her Dash matchup looks bad. And
Yeah,
I guess I don't. I think Oldhim was already able to fatigue Icelander. I'll kind of talk about this a little bit. Where like the new Imperial Warhorn tech, where they were playing Imperial Warhorn and they could kill your Frost Hex and one of your items as well, was very very powerful. And I think kind of I don't want to say single handedly shifted the matchup to being like very Oldhim favored, but I think like it was a close matchup before, and then once Warhorn was found, then I think it was like really solidly in Oldhim's favor. So it just seems weird to hit this amulet that's like cited as well. It made Icelander too good into the longer decks when she wasn't even good into them basically after the Warhorn.
that's fair.
After Warhorn,
And I guess the line of Amulet of Ice into acting Coronet Peak is a lot better than Winter's Bite. Your opponent pitches a blue, activate Coronet Peak doesn't really do anything anymore. So, yeah, I guess we'll have to see how it shakes out. And as far as like what a good swap is for Hypothermia in the deck, so if you just swap in Winter's Bite for the Amulet's Ice, I don't really know what you replace Hypothermia with, though. I think you're just kind of out of good ice cards. Like maybe you just have to play like blue Winter's Grasp again. I don't know.
yeah, I guess if you're trying to take the current Icelander list and kind of adjust for losing these cards, I think Winter's Bite is a pretty good one. I think instead of playing Hypothermia, I would probably just, or instead of trying to find a replacement for Hypothermia, I'd probably just try to find another powerful sideboard card. Like maybe you play Command and Conquer because it's good against Drobai and Lexi or something like that. Or maybe you play Encase, just like a sideboard card that's effective in some spots, and you're probably not going to fix your Dash matchup, but maybe you can make some of your other matchups better.
That's fair. Do you want to stick on the ice or do you want to take a break from ice? Because I think we'll have the most to say about Oldhim in the long run. But do you want to talk about Belittle Minnowism?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's go to Belittle Minnowism, or just Belittle. You can still play Minnowism.
Sure, technically, yeah. If that's something you wanted to do, you could still put Minnowism in your deck. So I guess I'll start on this one because I was never even a believer in Belittle Minnowism to begin with. So like this feels just weird to me. And we even see saying in like the chat in the Discord where in a deck like Dromai, where you were testing Belittle Minnowism, but you just didn't have anything to spend the resources on when you got a blue. And that was kind of like the grand unifying theory I felt like we were coming up with, where in order to play Belittle Minnowism, you had to be an aggressive deck. But you got to be an aggressive deck that is also capable of using the resources you get off of the blue. Because if you're just playing the Belittle, getting a Minnowism, but it's not actually like functionally changing anything about how your turn would play, it's just this weird 3-power, 1-cost 3-power go again attack that's not really doing anything for you. And we saw it be good in the decks that did have a lot of things to do with their resources, like Chain. Chain always wanted to play a million cards per turn. So having an effect like Belittle Minnowism, to go get that extra blue in order to play one of your cards from Banish really helped out a deck like Chain. We saw the Briar deck from Lil win that Pro Tour, and that deck was built around, playing Channel Mount Heroic, a lot of these big, beefy Earth cards. You were able to sink those resources into a Sonata Arcanix, you just have, or like Grasp of the Arknight. There were just lots of like resource sinks in that deck. And then ultimately we saw it in Fi, like most recently, and Fi was just able to activate Searing Emerald Blade most commonly, or Kadachi's at first, I believe, was like the first tech, and then it moved to Searing Emerald Blade, as well as activate Phi's hero ability if you just were, a little short on Draconic Chain Links. So there were ways to spend those resources in all those decks, but it wasn't like, the Dromai deck you were testing, that if you wanted to be an aggressive deck, was a very good Belittle Minnowism deck. It's not like Bolton or Lexi or like decks like I guess like it's not like it was just like the default way to even build a lot of these decks, because even after Matt Falks won that Pro Tour with Belittle Minnowism Briar, it just kind of fell off a cliff after that. Like it wasn't a problem in the metagame after that, and Briar decks kind of just moved on to being chonkier again. And I think it came with real deck building constraints in having to play like these 3 powered attacks, and then like I was saying, this whole point of the argument. So in addition to having ways to effectively use those resources, and I just don't think it warranted a ban at all.
Yeah, I think I want to add on to that I feel like Belittle really has kind of 2 cards that it interacts, that we found that it interacts really positively. One is Art of War, because you can pitch a blue, play your Belittle, fuse a blue attack, or not fuse, but reveal to Belittle a blue attack, and then go get a blue Minnowism, and then you cast the Art of War to get rid of this extra blue attack that you're going to have, because there aren't that many red reveals for Belittle. Most of the cards you're revealing for Belittle are blue. So having Art of War to basically get rid of that blue, and then now you're able, Art of War costs a resource, and now you're able to spend the resources because you got rid of the extra resources that you would have had from having too many blues, because you Art of War one of them away. So, and then Art of War makes the 1 for 3 very impactful, because it's getting +1 from the Art of War. So like it had a lot of value with Art of War. And then the other thing is, you're talking about kind of Briar and Chain and even Viscerai, how they all use Belittle at points. And a big part of that was that in these Runeblade decks, you could play Belittle and you'd go get red Minnowism, and then you'd play red Minnowism, and then you'd play another attack, and then your Rosetta Thorn was turned on because your Belittle got you your non-attack action. So Belittle was like a non-attack action that was also fine. It wasn't very good when you were like non-attack flooded, but like it was still an attack. So it had a lot of utility there. And then it just like was above rate while enabling your Rosetta Thorn, which is pretty crazy.
Sure, but I guess you said Viscerai in that list. I completely forgot Belittle Minnowism Viscerai was a deck. I still contend, like, if you put Belittle Minnowism in your Viscerai deck, you're just making that deck worse. Like, it's not even a benefit there.
Now you're making it an illegal deck.
Yeah, I guess now you're just making actually unplayable instead of before it was just figuratively unplayable. So yeah, I just ultimately, maybe there's like some other things that, I guess like if we think about it from like a future design perspective, though, I guess it does kind of put a ceiling on like what they can give aggressive decks as far as like high cost cards, because if like aggressive decks can just go play Belittle Minnowism and still cast like high cost cards or have all these additional resource sinks, that will fundamentally give them just like an unfair advantage in the long run, I guess, in like future design space. So I guess I could see that being an issue potentially down the line. But as it stood in the metagame, I just don't think it really needed it at this point in time, especially given the dominance of who we were seeing bully every deck in the format at this point in time in Oldhim. But do you want to move on to talking about Oldhim for about 4 or 5 hours?
I got one more thing about Belittle before we move on to Oldhim.
Okay, go for it.
I really think it kind of died for Art of War's sins. Like the 2 best Belittle decks were Phi and Chain, and these decks both, like, they're so good with Art of War. Art of War is so good in those decks, and like Belittle being specifically synergistic with Art of War, giving you the extra resources to play big Art of War turns. I think this is more a problem with Art of War than Belittle, and Belittle is kind of dying for Art of War when Art of War, I think, is the problem. But that's a Majestic. Yeah, well, we can't ban that.
They'll ban Art of War eventually. No, they can ban Majestics. They said they won't ban Legendaries in the thing, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
Just from like a player perspective. But yeah, I would like, they ban Majestics pretty regularly, and maybe there's just less oversight on Majestics because they just really want to tune and make sure Legendaries are powerful but not too powerful. And they've really done a good job of like making sure that they're towing that line, especially if like they're taking the stance of not ever wanting to ban them. I think the only one that came close was Stalagmite, but really, it turns out the problem wasn't Stalagmite. It was Winter's Wail the whole time. It was just we were just blind to it, but LSS was able to perfectly see through the blizzard in order to determine what the root cause of the issue of Stalagmite was.
Uh-huh. So Winter's Well is banned. Winter's Well is the reason that Oldhim is a playable hero outside of maybe you could play super hard fatigue without Winter's Well, but that's like not really like
That's
I
not a
don't know
viable strategy
how
in
playable
2023.
that deck is, and regardless of how playable it is, it's not something that you want to encourage if it is. But anyway, Winter's Well was kind of like what let Oldhim even disrupt the aggressive decks, because like you can't just have a big red disruptive attack every turn. That's just like not realistic. And Winter's Well, the threat of a Frostbite was very powerful, and it being a 0 for 4 or a 1 card 4 with an on hit was very powerful, similar to like Snatch or many of the commonly played 1 card 4s that have an on hit in Classic Constructed. So Winter's Well let Oldhim's be very consistent. Their turns had a pretty high floor when they had this weapon. And on top of that, they did have the 2 legendary shields that were both quite good and both worked well with Winter's Well being a one-handed weapon. But if you ban Winter's Well, what does an Oldhim deck look like without Winter's Well?
I think personally, I would go back to like, I think it was for Nationals before we came up with Bullander. I was working on an Anathos Oldhim, and that was specifically tech for the mirror. And I think now you can try picking that up again. Play cards like Pulverize and Earthlord Bounty. You could still do like Crown of Seeds, Ramparts, and like Earth React if you're also having like some like non blue Earth cards in your deck now. If you're playing like a bigger Oldhim deck, but I don't think ice-based Oldhim decks should really exist anymore, because now your one-handed weapon that you're going to play, I believe the only one left is Titan's Fist, right? I don't think there's another one-handed Guardian
I
weapon.
believe that's true.
And ice cards don't cost 3. That was what I was running into when I was building Anathos. I know there's Insidious Chill, and I think that was it. I think Insidious Chill is the only ice card that costs 3 or more. And if that means you're trying to build like the best aspects of Oldhim, which is the ice react on top of like the ice fuse cards, like Endless Winter, I just don't see how that's viable if you're, now you're swinging for 3 a turn most turns with your now you're not even losing the frostbite, you're also losing a whole point of damage. That's a lot to give up.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I agree that just like I don't know how you would build an ice-based Oldhim now. Like maybe you play 3 or 6 ice cards and then you have the threat of ice reacting all the time, but most of the time you're not actually going to ice react. But it seems like really hard to get more ice cards in your deck than that.
Yeah, we've been saying for a while, Bravo's been creeping up on power level to Oldhim, and they did it. The Mad Lads at LSS finally did it. Bravo now probably solidly above Oldhim, actually, in terms of like viability. Like, what a world we live in.
I think so. And I think there are arguments for playing like Anathos Oldhim over playing Bravo, but those arguments are probably not as strong as Crippling Crush.
And Showtime. Like, Showtime's
Yeah.
also like one of the best turn 1 plays in like the game now, right? Still.
Yeah, that's true. Showtime into Heat Pulverize, very good. So I think we might see some Oldhim. We might see like these people trying to play these hardcore fatigue Oldhims. We might see some aggressive Oldhims that probably are just a little bit worse than Bravo, or maybe more than a little bit worse than Bravo. Winter's Well did so much heavy lifting in terms of like making Oldhim a playable hero, and you can't really look at the current builds of Oldhim and just replace Winter's Well with Titan's Fist and have a functional deck because of what you're saying about the ice cards. Swinging Titan's Fist for 3 with no on hit is
Atrocious.
Atrocious. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Sending a
It's just
card into an
very
action
bad.
point for 3 damage. I think this kind of was pretty. I think this ban might be a little out of line, I guess. I don't know how to say that nicely. I think, like, if you don't want Oldhim to be playable, you kind of accomplish that. And Oldhim has been good for a while, and he has been. This is his 3rd ban, I think, in Classic Constructed, because he lost Awakening, he lost Pulse of Ice and Loft, and now he's using Winter's Wail.
Technically, Autumn's Touch, if you want to count that.
Fourth ban. But I guess Autumn's Touch wasn't really at Oldhim, but it did affect him. You couldn't.
Yeah.
Autumn's Touchable. Yeah. So I don't know. I think this is the band that I am like the most frustrated with. And I think like they could have done something to Oldhim like they've done to Starvo, where they're like, let's take away his Winter's Grasp or something. And that would be a pretty big nerf if you're taking away the blue ice block 3 from the deck. And that would get Oldhim closer to being in line. And banning Winter's Wail, I think like it also feels kind of unprecedented, which is why it's really weird. Like Rosetta Thorn dominated the metagame for a long time. They didn't touch it. And like Chain and Briar both essentially got to Living Legend through Rosetta Thorn. And I guess Starvo got to Living Legend with Winter's Wail, and Starvo was more dominant than Oldhim was. They didn't touch Winter's Wail then. So I don't know. It just feels really weird to me.
I think if we're looking at it from they don't want to ban legendaries perspective, Winter's Wail died for Stalagmite sins. Because I think on this podcast or social medias, the Discord server, anywhere, I've been saying just ban Stalagmite. Like, I think that card is like the real issue. The fact that you get two Frostbites out of nowhere on thin air that your opponent always has to figure out like their lines around it, like every turn while it's up, hugely oppressive. Like you get the 3 life and like those, like from the day that card was spoiled, I was like, this card's busted. And you showed us why it was busted against like when you were just beating up prisms, because they would be like, oh, I have 20 soul spectral shields, I'll pitch my yellow, and you just block us with Stalagmite, and they have a frostbite and they can't break the frostbite, and then the spectral shields sit there doing nothing, and then you just get to like go back to your turn because they just couldn't attack you with the spectral shields and break all their spectral shields. And that came up against like all the aggressive decks, where all the aggressive decks were always like, oh, I'm 1 resource short of now swinging my Rosetta Thorn. So now it's blocking the 2 damage that it blocked the first time, plus this additional 4 future damage, and potentially even more if like you're getting some other bonus from swinging that Rosetta Thorn, like I guess like breaking a Rune Chant I was thinking of, but I guess you get to keep the Rune Chants most of the time anyways. So just like the virtual damage that Stalagmite, like the value you get out of that shield is like ridiculous. And I thought banning Winter's Wail would be too hard, because like as we're discussing, I don't know how Oldhim functions now without Winter's Wail. Like it was his signature weapon. It was his signature weapon. Like now when he Living Legends, he just, do they change it to Titan's Fist? Does Titan's Fist rotate out with freaking Oldhim now? Like that's gonna matter. I think it just like actively takes this hero that was turn 1, like tier 1, and puts him like into like tier 3 category, in my opinion. Like I'm just so uninterested in anything this hero has going on anymore, especially considering I think a lot of people are like fatigue Oldhim, and I've said on like even at the beginning at this podcast, fatigue's not a viable strategy in 2023. People and decks have so many ways of just going over the top and presenting more than your 12 stupid block or 14 block, I guess, on a turn cycle if you're using Rampart and Crown of Seeds. Like, and like you'll eventually draw some 2 blocks. You'll like decks just have ways to go over this, and I think you'll be able to fatigue like players who don't know how to play around it. But I think once people like, if it ever became a dominant strategy or like almost a tier 1 deck, I think there are just a host of decks that are just like, oh, well, here's 30 damage in a row over like 2 turns. You're dead. You can't stop all this damage. It's just not a viable strategy in my opinion.
Yeah, I think like going in with a deck that's like only purpose is to fatigue, that's like that deck's just going to be bad. It's going to have decks that it cannot beat, and even decks that it should have a reasonable matchup into. The best pilots are going to be able to beat it most of the time. So especially if they have considered it somewhat when deck building. So like fatigue can do well when nobody's ready for it. People aren't prepared to play against it when they're all boarding in 6 defense reactions against Oldhim because all the Oldhims are trying to play on hits into them. Then maybe they could get fatigued because when you draw the 6 defense reactions, it's a lot harder to push through fatigue. But fatigue, I don't think could ever be tier 1. And I shouldn't say could ever, but like fatigue with the current tools that exist, just hard fatiguing from the get-go, not attacking, not playing an interesting game of Flesh and Blood. That's not really a thing that'll ever be like destroying the metagame or dominating the metagame. So, yeah. And then I think just still talking about Winter's Wail, I think I think they have never done something like this where they ban a hero's identity. Like, again, when they needed to nerf Starvo, they banned Autumn's Touch. When they needed to errata Briar, they didn't touch her weapon. When Chain was dominating the format with Rosetta Thorn, because Rosetta Thorn came out, they never touched Rosetta Thorn. They never touched Luminaris. When Starvo was dominating, they didn't touch Winter's Wail. And I think all of those heroes would have been in a better spot with losing their weapon than Oldhim is without his, because there just really isn't anything that does something similar to that. Titan's Fist, we talked about how much worse it is. And Anathos means, or if you play Anathos or Sledge, which are the other two options, and I think you could build an Oldhim deck around that, you're essentially banning the 2 shields anyway, because you don't have a one-handed weapon to use with them. So
yeah, I like that there's some cost. If like their design philosophy, I think it's safer to like push the defensive options. If you want the shields to be very good and the cost of playing those shields is like your weapon is like subpar or like not as powerful as the shields, because the Guardian identity anyway is supposed to be more defensive, fine with it. That's good. Just it has to be better than Titan's Fist. Like even if Titan's Fist was just 3 for 4, no drawback, I think this would still be a much different conversation. But the fact that Titan's Fist has like a drawback for a one-handed weapon on Guardian is kind of ridiculous, like compared to every single other hero's like weapons and like their identities at this point in time in the game. I would almost rather they just errata it so you could play 2 shields. Like just give me 2 Stalagmites at this point. I'll just hard fatigue, dual wield, 2 shields.
Yeah.
I would rather that over Titan's Fist if I'm playing an ice, deck.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of sick too, though, because then you could double block with Stalagmites and give them 2 Frostbites out of nowhere.
But then how do you win the game?
Guess.
What?
I don't know.
You have 2 shields. Oldhim has 2 shields. Neither of you could ever kill anybody.
You played that defense reaction. They just gave us the tools, the shield bash card, right?
What is it? I don't know. I don't even know.
It's like a defense reaction where like you get a bunch of like if you have a one-handed shield blocking, you deal a point of damage to them. It came out in Dynasty.
Okay.
You just play those.
You play 40 of them.
Ping, ping, ping.
So I guess I was like, maybe we'll get a new weapon for Oldhim in the next supplemental set. And then I realized that's 3 sets.
6 months away. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe the set after this one will have a new Guardian. But it's crazy, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I do think this is like a step too far in the direction. Like at this point, why not instead of touching any of like if you just want a hero to be like actually unplayable because they don't have a weapon, you could have just banned Waning Moon. You could have just like out of Icelander. Oh, she can't push arcane damage anymore. Like I don't know how that hero wins anymore if she doesn't have Waning Moon. Like, and as you were saying, like banning Luminaris out of Prism. I don't know how Prism ever would have won a game ever again. Like if you ban Luminaris, like I think Chain's the only hero that I could think of, and probably still Starvo. Those 2 heroes are just like, but like those 2 heroes have just like a fundamentally like flawed, like over the top hero ability that like you could give them a ham sandwich for their weapon and they're still probably going to be just fine. Like
you love ham sandwiches.
Yeah. Well, especially Chain. Why Chain? I just can't believe that hero made it out. People still look back at Starvo as like the biggest design mistake LSS ever made. I think it's Chain. I still to this day think it's Chain. Like, so decks have to work so hard to draw cards in this deck. Like, look at Tome of Findall, Tome of Harvest, Tome of Aetherwind. Like look at these tomes and see how it's like so hard to accrue like additional cards of value in Flesh and Blood. And Shane's just like, yeah, nah, it's fine. I'll get like 6 cards for free on this turn. No big deal. And it's like, excuse me? What? Oh, and I also get boots that let me play Tome of Findall at instant speed, so I can just draw more cards. And I have Belittle Minnowism, so I can just also tutor free resources from my deck as well. So this is all fair, though. Don't worry about it. I'll take a very long time to Living Legend.
So you said you don't think Oldhim's going to be playable or very good at all. I think I'm in a pretty similar spot. I think you can play aggressive Oldhim decks, or you can play hardcore fatigue Oldhim with Titan's Fist and the shield still, but Oldhim's no longer like this dynamic hero that can do a lot of different things on the back of his signature weapon. Now he's kind of like a lost old man with he lost his cane,
Yeah.
So I think Oldhim's metagame share will drop dramatically, and honestly, he's probably in a similar tier to like Arachne now, I would say.
I think Arachne's better.
Okay. Fair. I wouldn't fight with that. I would put like I don't think
I would almost put him in Azalea tier at this moment.
You put Arachne above Azalea?
Yes.
Okay. I put those 3 here. I think I put the 3 of those heroes in the same tier. Just like
that's fine.
Probably shouldn't be playing them.
Yeah. Just
if you're trying to win, at least
dubious tier, D tier. Like they're all they can all hang out there. That's fine. I guess they're like you can put them in any order you want in D tier, but like sure, that's where they live. That's where they live.
So
with Levia too.
Amulet of Ice and Hypothermia are gone. Where do you think Icelander's at now?
I think she's still playable. I think Icelander, and I think especially if people like start trimming a lot of AB, like disrespecting like wizards again. Not only like does like Icelander come out of the woodwork, Kano comes out of the woodwork too, to start preying on decks. So I think people still have to like respect wizards, still pack their AB, and still have like a plan into Icelander. I think she still has a lot of very good disruptive tools. And like obviously like Aether Ice Vein, still a legal card, still a messed up card, still a very good card. Like, and you're still going to be able to trigger Insidious Chill off of your Aether Ice Vein. And as far as like the combo elements of the game, like I think setting up like the Frost Hex Ice Eternal thing will be a lot harder since you don't have like as many sources to strip like your opponent's cards to really push through that damage and make those frostbites like not be poppable at the end of the game. And like Insidious Chill also has like this awkward dynamic where like you could choose when you wanted to pop in the device. You can't choose when like to not trigger you can't legally choose to not trigger your Insidious Chill. As soon as you Ice Fuse, that one of those counters are supposed to come off, and so that just kind of puts you in an awkward like situation where like, well, I really want to like fuse this blue Brain Freeze, but I also want to, but it's going to use my last Insidious Chill counter. So now 2 turns later, when you have your Aether Ice Vein, you're not stripping a card out of them before your Aether Ice Vein, and now they can AB. Like it just leads to some awkward play patterns, I guess, where Amulet of Ice was just more flexible in its timing.
Yeah. So Icelander not in the Arachne Azalea tier.
Yeah, I think she's like a B tier hero. I think I still wouldn't be surprised to see like Azalea pop up, and like I guess the ProQuest season continued, like win a ProQuest. I think like I wouldn't surprised to see her like top 8 some battle hardens and like callings and stuff like that, maybe even win. It's just gonna finding her right balance again and making sure that like the deck still functions cohesively. So
yeah, I think I'm in a similar spot. I think she still have a solid matchup into the Rune Blades. I think she's still solid into Fi. I think that she's much worse into Dash. She's much worse into Dromai, and she's much worse against anything that she wanted to combo against, because losing Amulet hurts the combo so much. So I would say that in the right metagame, if the Rune Blades are running around taking over again, Briar will get Living Legend, and then that'll stop. But if you predict a Rune Blade metagame, Icelander will still be a good choice. And I still think she has a solid 5 matchup. You just really need to dodge Dash and Dromai.
Yeah. So. And I guess like that could even be the calling like Indianapolis meta, because everybody's like, oh, Oldhim's gone, Icelander's gone, time to pick up Briar again. And I think everybody's just like hyped on Briar and Fi again. And to that point, I guess if everybody's hyped up on Fi and Briar, uh, then Dromai's not going to like that field at all. So that's going to push her stock way down. I guess Dash could still pop up and have like a reasonable game. Into like Boost Dash is still also like the third aggressive deck, so you just got to dodge the dashes. But yeah, I still think like the metagame overall is still like pretty amicable to Icelander, at least in the short term.
Yeah, I don't think I would be surprised to see an Icelander at the top 8 of Indianapolis. I think like she did get hit pretty hard, and she does need to dodge some matchups now more than before, where she had a pretty good matchup spread just all around. And I think like still playable. I'm not happy about the Amulet of Ice ban, but I think that she's not in a horrible spot.
Yeah, and Amulet of Ice, like, I guess hopping back to that card, I think that was a really like skill intensive card in like the mirror, where like if you're not hiding it behind a bunch of energy potions sneaking them on your opponent, um like figuring out the right timing in which to crack them, since they were like there was a decision to make, could be really tricky. And like you could get into like end game situations where like since you have priority first on your turn, you could just play an Ice Fuse card, and then that would allow and then trigger your Insidious Chills, and then before your opponent like could like crack Storm Striders or something like that, and in response, if your opponent goes like, well, crack Storm Striders, you could Amulet of Ice in response to them cracking Storm Striders and strip their hand to make sure that they couldn't come back at you. And now, if you have that same interaction where it's just like, oh, Ice Fuse, trigger my Insidious Chills, your opponent could just freely crack their Storm Striders. And unless you have like another Ice Fuse card and more counters on your Insidious Chill to trigger, they're just going to be able to go over the top of you in that situation. So, like, I think it makes the mirror like a bit more snowbally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
So, are you going to be playing Vi or Briar in Indianapolis, do you think?
So the last one, let's talk about Fi. So Belittle is banned. That hits Fi. I think Fi is the only deck that's like really playing Belittle right now. You could play it in some Briar lists. It wasn't the most popular way to play Briar, but it was definitely a thing you could do. And but I think Fi's stock is going to go down quite a bit too with Belittle being gone.
That's surprising. I think I pretty strongly disagree with that sentiment. I
Really?
think Fi has access to some pretty good blues, anyways, and a card like um, Tiger Stripe Shuko already like mitigates so much of the downside of playing like these blues, because you're just able to still accrue the additional point of damage by playing one of these draconic blues into your Phoenix Flame for the turn. Whereas like before, sadly, you weren't triggering Tiger Stripe Shuko all the time because you were coming in with this 3 powered attack and tutoring 3 resource out of your turn, coming in with like a 1 for 4, 0 for 4, and then your sword, and then a Phoenix Flame, and it's like, oh, I didn't have a powerful attack or a second little attack. I didn't get Tiger Stripe Shuko value this turn, but now it'll be easier to get Tiger Stripe Shuko turned on, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do just think that the power level of Belittle was quite high in the fight deck, especially in combination with Art of War. The turns that you went Belittle into Art of War were responsible for Fi's biggest turns, the highest damage output turns. Um, and losing that interaction means that I'm not sure if Fi's doing things better than the aggro decks enough to warrant still playing him over Briar and Dash. I guess he is pretty consistent. He does pretty consistent draws. Like you said, the power of blues are higher in his deck than a lot of the blues in like Briar or even Dash when you play them. So that is something for him. And he still can have a lot of his not stock turns, like big turns where he plays a 0 for 3 with Go Again into Sword, into Phoenix Flame, into Lava Burst. It's like a 3-card 13 or something. So
Yeah, and I think he'll be a less consistent deck, that's for sure. Like being able to tutor blues to make sure that you are always having like really consistent turns, it was definitely nice. But in its place, then I think you can't. I'm trying to think like what weapon you turn to. Maybe Kadachi's now instead, because I think you want to play. I think a lot of like the 1-cost attacks, I think is going to be awkward fitting those in now. So like the soaring strikes and the what's
Mounting
the other one?
Angers.
Mounting Anger. Yeah, I think those cards kind of have to be looked at really dubiously now, and you kind of have to go to like really hard on 0-cost go against. So I think like cards like Ravenous Rabble potentially could even like find a home in the deck again. Because like you really don't want to be pitching a lot of cards. But I guess to counterpoint my own point there, like you still have Flame Call Awakening to go tutor up a Phoenix Flame, so pitching a red there, and then like pitching the Phoenix Flame you tutor up to get 2 resources. So like Vi still has a pretty consistent way to like generate some free resources, you know, out of the deck. It's just not as many, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And you talked about pitching the flame for 2 with Furnace, right?
Yeah. You pitch a red, or you play like your Rising Resentment or whatever. Your opponent blocks it because they don't want to make your Flame Call Awakening free. You play your Flame Call Awakening, pitching whatever red. You get your Phoenix Flame. You pitch your Phoenix Flame to activate your Flame Scale Furnace. Swing for 2 with Sword. You now have 3 Draconic Chain Links. You get your Phoenix Flame, come in for Phoenix Flame for 1. They don't block it. You sacrifice your Mask of the Pouncing Links and you slam your
Lava Burst. Boom.
Lava
Or Saw
Burst.
the
Look at that.
Wounds.
Who even needs belittlement?
Yeah. I think the power level of the deck goes down a reasonable amount. It will still likely be one of the better aggressive decks. I don't know if it's as good as Briar and Dash now. It might still be. I was never a big aggro player, so I don't know. I think the fact that the argument was close when Icelander was around and very good, and Fi had this between Fi and Briar makes me pretty worried that Fi getting hit will and Fi getting hit and Icelander getting hit is a pretty big win for Briar, basically.
Yeah. If Hypothermia wasn't a necessary card for Briar, I guess like it was fine in the matchup, but it wasn't like the windmill slam dunk that it was in like a lot of other matchups. I think Icelander's like particularly well suited still against 2 out of the 3 big aggro decks then, because if Vi can't tutor up these resources with little minnowism anymore, like a random Frostbite from Icelander's arsenal could like completely ruin his day. And Briar's able to like better like play around that just because she naturally plays a lot more blues because of Channel Mount Heroic and stuff like that. But her still just being so vulnerable to hand rip and her just needing those 5-card hands in order to be at like her peak levels. I guess like Icelander stock doesn't go down as much as I thought it might otherwise. I guess like you just kind of have to figure out a good game plan into Dash, but that's probably doable.
And Dromai.
Dromai's not gonna. I don't consider Dromai a playable hero while aggressive decks are a thing. Like, prove to me that Dromai can beat like Fi and Briar, because I expect them to be 30 to 40% of the metagame now, and then we can talk about Dromai. But until then, I put her in like C tier, almost C minus tier.
Jeez. I don't think she could be 5 because of how Mask Momentum is so good against her. Just like
I don't think she can beat Briar either.
I think it wouldn't surprise me if Briar's favored, but I don't think it's not nearly as polarized as the 5 matchup. Anything else you want to touch on with this ban announcement?
Okay, it's the end of the episode. Nobody's listening anyways anymore. Bolton's the best deck. It's just the best deck in the format. I can't not say it. I need to scream it from my rooftop right now. I'm going to play Bolton in Indianapolis, and I'm going to win the calling with Bolton because nothing holds him back anymore. He's free. He's free to be the king of Classic Constructed in LSS. Don't listen to this part either. Bloodsheath Scaletta is basically the same thing as Courage of Bladehold, and you left Courage of Bladehold. You missed one of the most broken cards, and I'm going to take full advantage of it, and I'm just going to go and win the calling, and I'm just going to count. I'm going to make a video afterwards, and I'm just going to lie in a pile of Boltons, and I'm going to count my money. $1 bill at a time, $10,000. I'm going to count it out on a pile of Boltons after I win the calling. So look forward to that video.
I'm excited to see it. Are you leaving that in?
Probably.
Okay. Well, Bolton's the best. You heard it here first. Maybe I'll play Bolton too. Who knows?
I'd be happy to have a Bolton v Bolton mirror with you in the finals. I think I'm better. I'm a more seasoned Bolton aficionado than you, so I think I might have a slight edge in like navigating that. But I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, I didn't even realize you could give your E-Strike go again if you didn't charge. You just +2 with the E-Strike, and then you can banish a soul.
Yeah, you're one of the millions of people who don't know how Bolton's hero ability works out there. It was a blow. So I played Bolton in the Pro Quest last week, and like it was a blowout. Every time I sat down for my round 1 or for an opponent, I think every single person was like, "Yeah, my little brother loves Bolton. He plays Bolton all the time. I play Bolton every single match." Every single person said that to me all weekend, and they all knew how Bolton worked. And I was very sad. So I had no free wins. A no free wins with people not knowing how we worked. I still made top 8. Bolton's broken.
Broken. Top 8 at a Pro Quest. Broken.
He has no bad matchups anymore. Name
Icelander.
a single bad matchup. Icelander doesn't. I don't even think it's that bad anymore. I think it's fine. You don't have instant speed hypothermia. That was like the setup that, like, remember earlier back in the episode where I was like, sometimes you just have to shrug your shoulders and say, like, I guess I lose the game on the spot to hypothermia. Bolton was that deck.
Bolton and several other decks were that deck.
But especially Bolton. Because like he's so revolved around like his payoff turns, and like you just like play via the Vanguard and you're just like, oh, here's a hypothermia. And you're like, oh.
Guess I'm dead.
Guess I'm dead. Here's my Luminous Ascension. Oh, here's a hypothermia. Guess I'm dead. Good game. Do you want to go get lunch or something? But that doesn't exist anymore. Now you can give me a frostbite. It's fine. It's fine. I can just crack an energy potion and move on with my life. It's great. It's great. I'm so excited. And all these people are like, yeah, but I'm going to come in with Briar and fine, deal a bunch of damage. Okay, cool. I'm going to gain I'm going to deal 30 damage to you. I'm going to gain like 12 life. And I'm just going to present lethal to you for the rest of the game every turn with my E-strikes. And I'm going to win. I'm going to win the calling. It's going to be great.
I think I might be one of the people that comes in for so much, quote, so much damage with my aggro deck.
Good luck to you, buddy.
We'll
Godspeed.
See. Maybe I will still play Icelander. I think I'm kind of talking through this. You kind of talked me up on her a little bit. I might run Icelander back.
Okay. Icelander v. Bolton, final calling of Indianapolis. You heard it here first, folks.
The Manor Cast finals. Let's do it.
Anything else you want to say before we officially end the episode then?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, the next time you're losing to me in Indianapolis as I'm winning on Bolton, always remember, mind your manners. Thanks for watching.